I went to the International Congress of Mathematicians in 1978. At the time, I was a secretary of the London Mathematical Society, so I was going in semi-official capacity. And these Hungarians and other certain lucky English people, etc., in particular John Conway, had this new puzzle, toy, and Conway had worked out how to solve it. It was rather funny because I had dinner one night with John Conway and Roger Penrose, two of the brightest mathematicians in the world, and they worked out how to do it. Penrose did not believe that anybody could learn to do it without consulting a pocket full of notes, and his coat pocket was full of envelopes with moves, diagrams written on it, and he was amazed to discover that Conway could do it by memory. And Conway could do it. It only took him about 3.5 minutes. And everybody thought this was mind-boggling. But Conway gave me some suggestions about certain bits, ways you could study part of the structure of the cube. And when I managed to get a cube from one of the Hungarians, it was said that the Hungarian mathematicians had discovered that there wasn't any customs requirement about Rubik cubes, and they could bring them out, and they were worth more than hard currency. And they couldn't get hard currency to go to abroad, and they could take Rubik cubes abroad and trade them for books and even lodging, etc. And I got interested in this. After about 2 weeks, I worked out a method of solving it. And I then made inquiries about getting more of these because they weren't available in England. I wrote we didn't really know who was making them, but I wrote to the Hungarian embassy commercial attaché saying, was it possible to import these? And then I also asked, at that time, my Polytechnic in London had the National College of Polymer and Rubber Technology, and we had injection molding machines. And so I made inquiries about having molds made up and what it would cost to produce these. Nobody knew anything about the origin of them or if there was any patent protection on them. And it would have cost, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 pounds to set up and start producing them, and I didn't really quite feel like doing that. But then I got a phone call from a Hungarian importer who happened to be a cousin of one of the manufacturers, and he said he had brought in a quantity of cubes, and would I like some? And he had my name from the commercial attaché. And I said, yes, so let's start with 60, because my department had all gotten hooked on these things, and I knew it would be easy to sell that many. So I said, yeah, I'll take 60. And then I walked around my department and asked, I said, I've got a supply of Rubik cubes. We didn't know what they were called. They weren't called Rubik cubes then. They were still magic cubes. And they were all spoken for in 5 minutes. So I went back and rang the guy up and said, well, instead of 60, maybe I should have 100. And they came, and about 3 days later, I had to order another 100. And then 3 days after that, I ordered 200. And within about 6 weeks, within 2 months, maybe 3 months, we had sold all the cubes this guy had brought in. He thought he had enough for several years, and they had gone. And then I started to learn more about the Hungarian bit. When Rubik first produced these, they made a run of 5,000 of them. I think this was 76, and in the spring of 76, and somebody said in September, we better see about, doing some advertising and selling these cubes. And somebody said, well, how many have we got left? And they rang up the warehouse and they discovered they didn't have any left. They thought they had enough to last through Christmas, and it had already run out in September. And this led them to think, we may be on to a winner here, which they did very, very well. And then I wrote, and I was getting correspondence from people. People knew I was interested in it and so on. And the correspondence was confused by the fact that everybody had their own notation for describing what they were doing. And in, I guess it would have been, I suppose, December of '78, I was trying, and I came up with a notation which I didn't like, and then I thought, it's the notation, this is the notation, and it turns out to be the one that is still in use. It displaced all other notations and is now the standard notation for, even when translated into Hungarian and Chinese and Japanese, it's the basic notation and the ideas are continue. And I wrote a whole book on the group theory necessary to understand what the Rubik cube was doing. And about 3 years later, an American mathematician decided and adapted it to be a book on teaching group theory via the Rubik cube. And it's, as a puzzler, one likes to hold things in one's hand and manipulate. And this is a aspect of perception and knowledge which you don't get in normal classes in arithmetic or calculus or what have you. The sort of kinesthetic or dynamic versions. And I at various times described it as the most powerful teaching tool we had ever had, the first real tool for teaching group theory. So you could hold it in your hand and you could understand some of the abstract maneuvers that went on in group theory, what are called conjugation and commutators, which when you see them done on paper, you don't really quite see what's going on. But when you do them physically, you say, that's putting that there, and then that there, and then that back, and then back. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you have a dynamic feeling for what these maneuvers are. And since groups are basically about movement, but it's a good teaching tool because normally the teaching of groups is divorced from any actual object or any actual movement. And having this, I think, is an incredibly useful teaching tool.